My name is Jake. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse by a Catholic priest 24 years ago. I was a student at a Catholic high school at the time, and the perpetrator was the principal. My story is not all that different from the multitude of experiences of other survivors. He befriended me, made me feel important, allowed me into his elite group of friends, and gave me unprecedented access to alcohol and pornography, and then began to abuse me. The abuse lasted for nearly 2 years. I had felt that I'd nowhere to run. He was such a well-liked person that no one would believe me. My parents were happy to have him in my life as a positive role model. During my failing year at college, I informed my parents of what happened. They, of course, were devastated and filled with guilt for encouraging the relationship. Then they went to the church. The church said they would look into it. Nothing happened. So I ran from the problem. I ran everywhere I could. I joined the military. I went off to a foreign land for several years. I buried myself in parties and alcohol. But the effects of abuse are long-lasting, devastating, and very patient. After my tour of duty, I returned to a different home. I did not want to go back to the area in which I had grown up. The familiar friends and places were something I wanted to forget. First, the flashes of painful memories started. My thought processes were frequently interrupted by these memories, these momentary pricks of painful reminders that upset any current train of thought, any current task, any current mood. As a response to those painful memories, I shut down my emotions. I became a cold void of a soul until such time I could forget and restart my train. Sometimes the flashes were spontaneous, occurring at any time. Other times these flashes were triggered by a familiar sight or song or place, such as a church, a priest, a crucifix, or other simple icon of the church. To be inside of a church or in a close proximity to a priest just unleashed a torrent of memories and angry thoughts that acted like a shotgun to my emotions. Then the nightmares invaded my sleep. I wake up with the images of the abuse still lingering in my head. These aren't the kind of dreams where one wakes up and rolls over and returns to sleep. These dreams are the WMDs of nightmares that jolt you awake with a cry, waking your spouse and your kids and the neighborhood dogs. These force you awake, wiping any slumber from your mind, leaving you to pace the hall for the remainder of the night. When these occur, the next morning, the next day, and sometimes the next week is ruined by a twilight state of emotionless existence. I have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I have been on medication for depression. I have, in the last 24 years, turned to large quantities of caffeine, alcohol, and prescription pain medication. I would try anything to forget, to jumpstart myself into a better mood, to force myself to care again. About a year ago, I traveled to a group session of survivors, one of whom was abused by the same priest as I, but earlier than I. He sat in front of me, a grown man with graying hairs and tears running down his face, tears caused not from his abuse, but from his own guilt for not coming forward before I was abused. He felt guilty because he couldn't stop the abuser from getting to others, to me. The effects of the abuse do not just go away. They last forever, not only for the victim, but for his family and friends. It is many years before the victims even come to terms with the abuse, many years before they can stop running from it and stop to face it. It is the nature of the abuse to harbor the pain, to run from it, to ignore it, to bury it in alcohol and drugs, to silently just exist. This is why I believe that any statute of limitations for sexual abuse is wrong. I went to my father's funeral mass recently. While his faith was tested when he found out about my abuse, he was still a devout Catholic and a great man of faith. We all sat there in church, my brothers and sisters and many family members, all grieving for the loss except for me. I couldn't grieve for my father because of the flashbacks and the painful memories that flooded my mind, because I was inside a Catholic church and surrounded by the images of the faith that allowed and enabled the abuse to take place. The conveyor belt of my thoughts were overwhelmed with boxes of bad images and vengeful thoughts and hateful emotions. I would just have to mourn the loss of my father later, alone. Apathy is my bane now. Someone once told me, to be on the side of the abuser, one must do nothing. One must be apathetic. To be on the side of the victim, one must do something. They must act. They must feel the outrage and pain and be moved to call someone, to voice an opinion. It is easier to be on the side of the abuser. After 24 years of the effects of the abuse, I can no longer afford apathy or fear. I cannot just exist any longer. My story must be told. My life must not be repeated in today's children. I have found my voice and I will speak out. My name is Jake, and I am a survivor of sexual abuse by a Catholic priest. And not a day passes that I don't feel the effects. But I'm a lucky one. I had good parents. I have a great wife and wonderful kids and a roof over my head. I am no longer a victim. I am a survivor. I survived because I stopped running to face it. I now grieve for those who don't have those support structures in place. I grieve for those who still can't cope with the abuse and turn to alcohol and drugs. But mostly I grieve for those who have not yet found their voice, those who still suffer in silence, those who have not yet reached out for help. If you are a victim or a survivor, rest assured you are not alone.